Oh my God.
The smell woke me first. Mom? Do you smell that?
It's nothing. Now go. You'll be late.
Come on, Buster, what is it?
Like when something happens in your house and you know something is not right, but you cannot see it yet. She was walking her dog that morning because her mom made her walk the dog every morning before school. She did not want to walk the dog. She wanted to sleep more. She wanted to sit on her phone more. She wanted to do almost anything except walk a small, energetic golden retriever down a muddy path at 6:45 in the morning, on a day that felt too cold and too gray to be real. But the dog pulled her forward, and the smell pulled her attention, and then her eyes saw something that made her feet stop moving completely. A horse was being hit. Not hit the way horses get hit in movies. There was no Hollywood drama, no music playing, no camera angle making it look cinematic and fake. Dies was real. This was a man in pajamas and a winter coat standing on a muddy riverbank, holding a stick and swinging it at a horse that was covered in so much mud you could barely see the color of her body underneath. The horse was standing in water. Cold water. March water. The kind of water that kills things if they stay in it too long. Maya's dog stopped pulling. The dog felt it too. That thing, that wrongness. The dog sat down in the mud and did not move. The man did not see Maya. This was important. The man was looking only at the horse. The man's face was red. The man's voice was loud. He was screaming words that Maya would not repeat to anyone, not even her best friend. The crop he was holding was coming down again and again and again, and the horse was not running away. This was the part that made Maya feel strange in her stomach. The horse was not trying to escape. The horse was just standing there, shaking, breathing hard, like she had already given up. That is when Maya understood something that she had never understood before. She understood that sometimes when you are really scared and really hurt, and there is nowhere to go and no one to help you, you stop trying to get away. You just wait and hope it ends. She had read about this in a psychology class. She had thought it was just something you learned about in school. She had not thought it was something she would actually see happening in front of her. The horse moved one step forward. The man screamed louder. The crop came down harder. And something just broke open in Maya's chest. She did not think about what she was doing. She did not consider that this was someone's private land. She did not worry about whether she would get in trouble. She simply pulled out her phone. The video started recording at 6:47 and 23 seconds in the morning. What the phone camera captured was this: a girl in the background, a dog sitting in mud, a man in pajamas swinging a crop, a horse with her head down, water, mud, a boat in the background that nobody would understand the point of. A moment that lasted less than a minute but would change the direction of multiple lives forever. The man finally stopped. His arm had gotten tired. He stood there breathing hard, holding the crop down at his side, looking at the horse like he was trying to understand something that did not make sense to him. The horse did not move. The horse did not look at him. The horse was just breathing hoosts, existing, just surviving. Maya walked backward slowly. She did not take her eyes off the scene. She walked backward until she was far enough away that the man probably could not hear her moving. Then she turned and walked back down the path. Fast. Not running, because running would make the dog scared but very fast. Her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her neck. When she got home, her mother was making breakfast, toast and eggs. Something so normal and boring that it seemed impossible that the world also contained the thing Maya had just seen. Her mother asked her how the walk was. Maya said it was fine. She did not say, "Fine, said fine." Then she went to her room and sat on her bed and looked at the video she had filmed. 40-3 seconds. That was all it was. 43 seconds. But in those 43 seconds, everything about Maya's day changed. Everything about her morning changed. Everything about what she thought was true about the world changed. She posted the video on a community page that her mom followed, a page for people in their small area to share information about things happening around town. Lost dogs, found wallets, garage sales, road closures. She did not know what would happen. She just knew that someone needed to know about this. Someone needed to see what was happening by the river at 6:47 in the morning. She hit post. It was 6:59. The first person to see the video was an older woman named Susan, who worked at a coffee shop and was checking the community page while waiting for her shift to start. Susan watched the video. Her coffee got cold. She watched it. Again, she shared it immediately with no comment, just a small icon that meant she was angry. The second person to see the video was a man named Robert, who was a veterinarian. He watched it while sitting in his car, waiting for the animal hospital to open. His stomach felt strange. He knew that horse, or at least, he thought he might know that horse. He had treated a horse like that once, before she was owned by the man in pajamas. That horse had been healthier then. That horse had been different then. By 7:15 in the morning, the video had been shared to 23 different people. By 7:45 in the morning, it had been seen by Rebecca Chun, who worked for an animal protection organization and who had just finished her morning coffee. Rebecca Chun did not say anything when she watched it. She simply clicked on the details of where it was posted. She looked up the location on a map. She opened her computer. She started making phone calls.
It took her 18 minutes to figure out who owned the land. It took her another 6 minutes to figure out who owned the horse. When she typed the name into her computer and looked at the records, she felt something move through her that was part anger and part something worse than anger. She had seen this name before. She had received complaints about this person before. But there had never been video. There had never been proof like this. She called the police department. It was 7:51 in the morning. 27 minutes had passed since Maya had hit the record button on her phone. 27 minutes since that moment by the river when the horse was shaking and the man was screaming and the world looked like it was ending. 27 minutes, and already the machinery of rescue was beginning to move. The horse did not know this. The horse only knew that her body hurt, and that her throat felt tight from the rope, and that the water was cold, and that everything was scary. But something was about to change in her life in a way that she could not possibly understand. Something was about to happen because a teenage girl had walked her dog at exactly the right time and had cared enough to pull out her phone and had been brave enough to share what she had seen. The horse was about to learn that the world was larger than just a man with the crop. The horse was about to learn that being alone was not the same as being powerless. The horse was about to learn in the next few hours that sometimes when you think everything is ending, that is exactly the moment when everything is beginning. And it all started because of 43 seconds of video. It all started because someone was paying attention. It all started because someone decided to see and to share what they saw. The video had been watched 247 times by 8:15 in the morning. By 9 o'clock in the morning, it had been watched 3,421 times. By 10 o'clock in the morning, nobody could count anymore because it was spreading too fast. People were sharing it to their stories. People were tagging their friends. People who had never spoken about animal abuse before were suddenly typing angry comments and making phone calls to people they had never called before. Thomas Merrick knew nothing about any of this. He was in his shower. He was washing the mud off his hands. He was telling himself that nothing bad was going to happen. He was telling himself that nobody had seen. He was telling himself that the horse would recover and everything would be fine. He was very, very wrong about everything. At 10:34 in the morning, a police truck pulled up to his gate. This was the moment that everything changed forever. This was the moment that Thomas Merrick's life stopped being the life he had been living and became the life he would be living from that point forward. He did not know it yet, but his body knew. His body felt it before his mind understood. His stomach dropped. His hands started shaking. He came downstairs and looked out the window and saw the police truck and understood that the morning he had been trying to ignore was not going to stay ignored. He opened the door. The officer was young, maybe 30 years old, maybe younger. He had that look that police officers get when they have seen too much suffering and they're tired of watching people hurt things they should never hurt. Behind the officer came 3 other people. 2 of them were wearing shirts that said Veterinary Medical Examiner, in letters so official and serious that Merrick's mind immediately went to a very bad place. "Thomas Merrick?" the officer asked. It was not a question. It was a statement. The officer already knew who he was. "That is me," Merrick said. His voice came out weird, like his throat was not working correctly. "What is this about?" "We have received a report of animal abuse on this property," the officer said. "We are here to investigate and to secure the animal for medical evaluation." Merrick's face did something strange. It got red. It got hot. His brain was screaming at him to lie, to explain, to make it sound different from what it actually was. But there were now 4 people standing on his porch looking at him like they already knew the truth. "The horse is fine," he said. "She just needs some exercise. She is being stubborn. That is all." The veterinarian stepped forward. She was an older woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen every way that humans could hurt animals. She looked at Merrick and did not say anything. She just looked. Then she walked past him toward the river. Merrick tried to follow them, but the officer moved slightly in a way that made it clear that Merrick should stay where he was. So Merrick stayed, and he listened, and he heard voices coming from the direction of the river. One voice said, "Oh my God." Another voice said, "Get the van. Now." And then the veterinarian came back, and she looked at Merrick with a look that was not anger. It was worse than anger. It was disappointment. It was the look of someone who had believed that there might be an explanation and had just discovered that there was not. "That horse needs emergency medical care," the veterinarian said. "She is dehydrated. She has rope burns on her neck that are infected. She has signs of chronic malnutrition. She has bruises and patterns that suggest regular beating." "How long has this been going on?" Merrick did not answer. He could not answer. His mouth was trying to form words, but words were not coming out. "There is something else," the veterinarian said. And this was when the biggest shock came. This was when something unexpected happened that would change the entire situation. "I know this horse. I treated her 5 years ago when she came from the import facility. She was healthy then. She was strong then. I took blood work. I have records. This is not a horse that has been properly cared for in the time you have owned her." The room got very quiet. "You are documenting abuse of an animal that you have medical records of being healthy," the officer said. His voice was not loud, but it was so steady and so serious that it made everything feel even more real. "That changes things. That makes this documented neglect. That makes this a pattern." Other people were arriving now. A second truck. People with cameras. People with clipboards. The veterinarian was leading them to the river. And Merrick realized with a horror that went so deep it felt physical that the officer was going to let him watch. The officer was going to make him see what he had done. So Merrick walked to the river, and he saw Petra. He saw the mud caked so thick on her body that you could not see her real color. He saw her standing very still in the cold water. He saw her ribs, actually saw them, counted them visibly through her skin. He saw her legs shaking not from cold, but from exhaustion. He saw her eyes that had something broken in them that looked like it could not be fixed. And Merrick understood something that he had not understood before. He had thought he owned a powerful horse. He had thought he owned an expensive piece of property that he could do whatever he wanted with. But what he was looking at was not property. What he was looking at was a creature that had been trying to survive what he had been doing to her. One of the veterinary people was taking photographs. Another was taking measurements. The older veterinarian was examining Petra's neck where the rope had cut into her flesh. "These cuts are infected," she was saying, "probably from at least a week of continuous rope pressure. This animal should be in pain constantly. The fact that she is standing at all is a miracle." A woman with a camera said, "This is going on the report. This is going on the record." And then the officer turned to Merrick and said something that Merrick would remember for the rest of his life. "How did you think this was going to end?" the officer asked. "Did you think nobody would ever see?" Did you think there would never be a consequence? Did you think you would just keep doing this forever? Merrick could not answer. He was looking at Petra, at what he had made her become. You are under arrest for animal cruelty and neglect, the officer said. What happened next was very fast and very official. Merrick was put in the police truck. He was read his rights. He was taken to a police station where he would sit for hours waiting for a lawyer and waiting for the reality of what he had done to settle into his bones. Meanwhile, at the river, Petra was being carefully moved from the water. It took 3 veterinarians and 2 rescue workers to do it safely. She was so weak that they had to support her weight. Her legs wanted to collapse. Her body wanted to shut down. But the veterinarians would not let her. They held her up. They moved her toward the special animal ambulance that had been called. They spoke to her in quiet voices while they worked. You are safe now, the older veterinarian kept saying. You are safe now. You can stop now. You can be safe. At 11:47 in the morning, Petra was loaded into the ambulance. At 12:15 in the afternoon, the video had been seen by more than 27,000 people. At 12:33 in the afternoon, local news stations had picked up the story. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the story was spreading across the internet like fire. Thomas Merrick's name was everywhere. His face was on screens. The village where he lived was being identified. His family was getting phone calls from strangers who were so angry they could barely form words. But Merrick was not thinking about any of that. Merrick was in a holding cell thinking about the fact that the horse he had owned was now in an emergency veterinary clinic receiving fluids and pain medication. Merrick was thinking about the veterinarian's words. She's a strong horse. Very strong. If we had found her even a day later, she might not have survived. One day, that was how close Petra had been to not surviving. One day, and the world would have lost her. But the world did not lose her. Because Maya had walked her dog. Because Maya had decided to pull out her phone. Because 27,000 people had decided that what they saw mattered enough to share. The universe had shifted on its axis. And Petra, who had been alone in her suffering, was no longer alone anymore. Thomas Merrick had been in the county jail for 6 days when his lawyer told him the bad news. It was not one piece of bad news. It was a series of bad news that got worse the more the lawyer explained it. The video had been seen by now by more than 400,000 people. News stations in 3 different states had covered the story. The prosecutor was not going to offer him a deal. The prosecutor was going to use every piece of evidence, every photograph, every medical record, and every moment of the video to prove that Merrick was not just a man who made one bad decision. Merrick was a man who had made a pattern of bad decisions that added up to something that looked very much like a crime. You could get 3 to 5 years, the lawyer said. The lawyer looked tired. The lawyer had probably told a lot of people that they were going to prison. But this time, the lawyer did something different. This time, the lawyer looked at Merrick and said something that was not about the law. I need to be honest with you. I watched the video. I have seen videos before. But something about this one. The lawyer stopped. He could not finish the sentence. He just shook his head. Merrick was moved to state prison on a Tuesday morning in April. He was 37 years old. He had never been to prison before. He had thought he would be more scared. But instead, he just felt empty. Like something had been taken out of him and there was nothing left to feel with. The farm had been seized. His bank accounts had been frozen. His family had stopped answering his phone calls. A news crew had shown up at his mother's house and asked her how it felt to have a son who was famous for torturing an animal. His mother had closed the door. She had not called him since. What Merrick did not know was that while he was being processed into prison, Petra was beginning her recovery at an animal sanctuary 3 hours away. He did not know that the first time the veterinarians examined her outside of the emergency clinic, they found injuries that were even worse than they had initially thought. He did not know that a broken rib had punctured in her lung space. He did not know that she was on pain medication so strong that it made her sleepy and distant. He did not know that she was alive only because of decisions that had been made in the first hours after her rescue. And he had no way of knowing that someone was watching all of this. Someone was documenting it. Someone was putting together a comprehensive record of what had happened to Petra and what was happening to her now. 2 months into his prison sentence, Merrick received a letter. It came through the prison mail system. It had a return address that said Regional Animal Protection Foundation. It had no personal message on the envelope, just his name, just the prison address. Merrick opened it very carefully because in prison you learn to be careful about things, even things that look like they are probably fine. Inside was a single photograph and a single letter. The photograph showed a horse standing in a field. The horse had a shiny brown coat. The horse was fat and healthy. The horse's ears were pointed forward. The horse was looking at the camera with eyes that were not afraid. The horse was beautiful. It took Merrick 30 seconds to understand that the horse in the photograph was Petra. He did not recognize her at first because the difference was so complete. The mud was gone. The fear was gone. The suffering was gone. What remained was a creature that looked like she had never been hurt at all. But Merrick knew it was her because he had spent 5 years looking at her face. He knew the shape of her head. He knew the color of her coat underneath the mud that had always been there. He knew. The letter was from a woman named Rebecca Chun who had been the first professional to see the video. The letter said, "Thomas, I do not know if you want to know this. I do not know if you care. But I think you need to know what your animal has become. Petra arrived at our sanctuary 6 weeks ago as a horse that we thought might not survive. Today, 6 weeks later, she is a horse that is living. Not just surviving, actually living. She eats good hay. She stands in the sun. She has made friendships with other horses. She has learned that not all human contact means pain. This has not happened because of anything you did. This has happened because you stopped. This has happened because you were stopped. I wanted you to see what is possible when cruelty stops. I wanted you to know that the animal you hurt is thriving without you. Respectfully, Rebecca Chun." Merrick read the letter 17 times. Then he read it again. Then he sat on his prison bunk, and he did something that he had not done since his arrest. He cried. Not angry tears, not scared tears, just tears that came from a place so deep inside him that it felt like his body was breaking open. He looked at the photograph again and again. He studied Petra's face, looking for something. Maybe he was looking for forgiveness. Maybe he was looking for anger. Maybe he was just looking for proof that she was okay. Because if she was okay, then maybe there was something in the universe that was still okay. Maybe he had not destroyed everything. That night, Merrick could not sleep. He lay on his bunk, and he thought about the farm. He thought about the moment when he had decided to tie the rope to Petra's neck. He thought about the moment when he had picked up the crop. He thought about the moment when he had convinced himself that the horse's power was infinite and could be pushed forever. He thought about every single moment of cruelty, and he let himself feel, for the first time, the actual weight of what he had done. The next morning, Merrick asked to speak to the prison psychologist. It was an unusual request. Most people did not ask for the prison psychologist, but Merrick asked. And when the psychologist came, Merrick said something that surprised both of them. "I want to understand why I did that," Merrick said. "Not to excuse it, not to justify it. I want to understand it so I can make sure I never do anything like it again. I want to understand it so I can become someone different than who I was." The psychologist looked at him and did not say anything for a long time. "That is the first honest thing I have heard anyone say in this prison," the psychologist said finally. "Most people blame other people. Most people say it was not their fault. But you are asking to understand yourself. That is different. That is rare. What happened over the next 3 years was the slow transformation of Thomas Merrick from a man who had been cruel into a man who was trying to understand cruelty. He read psychology books. He attended therapy sessions. He wrote letters to the sanctuary asking how Petra was doing. He started to understand that his cruelty had not come from nowhere. It had come from his own desperation, from his own fear of losing power, from his own failure to understand that power over another creature was not real power at all. He wrote to Rebecca Chun asking if Petra was happy. He never expected to get an answer. But Rebecca Chun wrote back. In her letter, she said, "Yes, Petra is happy. She's happier than horses usually are. And you know what the most remarkable thing is? She seems to understand, somehow, that she is lucky to be alive. She seems to know that her life was almost taken from her. And instead of being angry about that, she is just grateful for every day. If you could learn to be like that, Thomas, then maybe there would be something good that came from this tragedy." Merrick read that letter and understood something that changed his entire understanding of everything. He understood that forgiveness was not something that was done for him. Forgiveness was something that Petra had done for herself. By refusing to let the past determine her future. By choosing to live instead of continuing to suffer. And he understood that he needed to do the same thing. He needed to stop punishing himself and start becoming someone worthy of the world that Petra had chosen to keep living in. David arrived at the sanctuary on a Thursday morning in July, and nobody thought she would make it even 1 week. She was 16 years old, and she had already been hurt in more ways than most people experience in a lifetime. Foster care, drugs, violence, the kind of damage that gets written down in case files and social worker reports. The kind of damage that makes people say things like she is too far gone and there's nothing we can do for her now. The judge had told her that the sanctuary was her last chance. Not her second to last chance. Her absolute last chance. After this, there was juvenile detention. After this, there was the adult prison system. After this, there was the kind of life that does not improve. The judge had looked at her case file and had seen something that other people had missed. The judge had seen a girl who was exactly like Petra. So David was sent to the sanctuary. She was angry about it. She was angry about everything. She was angry at her caseworker. She was angry at the judge. She was angry at the world that had been so cruel to her that she had decided being cruel back was the only way to survive. The first 3 days at the sanctuary, David did not talk to anyone. She did not help with the horses. She did not participate in the activities. She just sat in her room in the staff house and looked at nothing. Rebecca Chun came to talk to her on the 4th day. The horses do not care if you talk to them or not, Rebecca said. This was not the kind of thing that David expected to hear from an adult. Adults usually had expectations. Adults usually wanted her to change immediately. But they are there if you want to be around them. There is one horse named Petra. She's probably the most famous horse in this state right now. Do you want to meet her? David did not answer, but she followed Rebecca out to the pasture. What David saw when she saw Petra was not what she expected to see. She expected to see a beautiful horse. A perfect horse. The kind of horse that stories get written about. But what she saw was a horse with scars. Visible scars on her neck where a rope had cut into her skin. David could see the damage. Everyone could see the damage. But what was strange was that the scars did not make the horse look broken. The scars made the horse look like someone who had survived something terrible and was choosing to keep living anyway. That horse was tortured, Rebecca said. It was not a gentle way to say it. But David appreciated that Rebecca was not softening it. Rebecca was not treating her like she was too fragile to understand truth. Someone hurt her on purpose. Someone made her suffer. But now she is here, and she is learning that not all humans are dangerous. She is learning that it is possible to trust again. This takes time. This takes patience. But it is possible. David did not move for a very long time. She was looking at Petra. Petra was looking at David. And something strange happened. Something that nobody could have predicted. Petra walked over to the fence where David was standing. Do not try to touch her yet, Rebecca said quietly. She decides who she trusts. You just have to be here. You have to show up. That is enough. David stood at the fence, and Petra stood on the other side of the fence. They just looked at each other. David was a girl who had learned in life that looking at people was dangerous. Looking meant making contact. Contact meant potential pain. But looking at Petra was different. Petra was not going to hurt her. Petra was just looking back. Petra was just being present. Petra was just choosing to stand near her. They stood like that for 30 minutes. Nobody told David to move. Nobody told her to do anything. She just stood there, and the horse stood there, and they looked at each other while the sun moved across the sky, and the world continued on. When David finally walked away, Rebecca asked her one question. Did anything change for you? Rebecca asked. No, David said. But then she stopped walking. Actually, yes, something changed. I do not know what it was, but something changed. What changed was small and invisible. What changed was that David had been present with another creature without hurting it and without being hurt. David had stood near something living and had not destroyed it. This was not something David had done very often in her life. The next day, David asked to help clean out the horse stalls. The day after that, she asked to help give the horses water. By the end of the first week, David was volunteering to do more work than she was supposed to do. By the end of the second week, David had something that looked like a smile on her face. But the real turning point came on a Tuesday morning in the third week. David was in the pasture helping to distribute hay when she noticed Petra standing alone in the shade of a large oak tree. David walked over to the tree. Petra did not move away, and David did something that she had never done before. She sat down in the dirt next to a living creature that was not a human. Petra lowered her head and breathed out slowly. The breath came out warm, and her nostrils moved large, and then small, and then large again. David watched this breath, this simple act of breathing, this proof that inside this scarred body was a creature that was still living, still feeling, still showing up every day. And David put out her hand, very slowly, not fast, not with aggression, just slow and steady. She put out her hand, and Petra looked at it. Petra could have walked away. Petra had every right to be afraid of human hands. But Petra stepped forward, and she let David touch her neck, right where the rope scars were, right where the damage was most visible. David began to cry. Not the angry tears that David usually cried. These were different tears. These were tears that came from somewhere much deeper. These were tears that meant something was breaking open inside her, but it was the kind of breaking open that meant healing instead of death. "She let me touch her," David said to Rebecca later. Rebecca had found her sitting by the fence, still crying. "She let me touch the place where she was hurt. And she did not get angry. She did not punish me. She just let me." "That is what trust looks like," Rebecca said. "That is what happens when something broken chooses to open itself up to something else that is broken." Petra is showing you that healing is possible. She is showing you that surviving does not mean staying closed off forever. She is showing you that you can let people get close to the hurt places. By the end of David's first month at the sanctuary, she had a job. She was working with the younger horses. She was gentle with them in a way that shocked everyone who knew her. She was patient. She was kind. She was the kind of person that people said had really turned their life around. But the truth was simpler than that. The truth was that David had met a horse who had survived something terrible and who had chosen to trust anyway. And David had decided that if a horse could be that brave, maybe she could be too. One afternoon in August, David was sitting with Petra when she said something that nobody expected to hear. "I think I'm going to live," David said. Not, "I want to live." Not, "maybe I can live." Just, "I think I'm going to live." Like she had made a decision. Like she had actually chosen life instead of just surviving. Petra did not answer. Horses do not answer in words. But Petra stood up and pressed her forehead against David's forehead. And in that moment, something passed between them. Some knowledge, some understanding, some deep animal wisdom that said, "Yes, this is possible. We will both keep living. We will both keep healing. And we will do it together." When Rebecca found them like that, pressed against each other in the shade, she understood something very important. She understood that Petra was not just being healed. Petra was healing. The most powerful thing in the entire sanctuary was not the veterinarians or the therapy or the programs. The most powerful thing was a horse who had decided to open her heart to another broken creature and show that creature that living was still possible. Thomas Merrick was released from prison on a Tuesday morning in February, 10 years after the video that started everything. 10 years. That is how long he had been away from the world. That is how long Petra had been healing without him. That is how long he had been learning to become someone different than who he was. He was not the same person who had walked out of court 10 years ago. Prison had changed him. The letter from Rebecca had changed him. The photograph of Petra had changed him. The knowledge that every single day for 10 years, Petra was somewhere in the world living without fear, that had changed him the most. He did not go directly to the sanctuary. He went to a small apartment first. He got a job at a warehouse. Thomas Merrick was released from prison on a Tuesday morning in February, 10 years after the video that started everything. 10 years. That is how long he had been away from the world. That is how long Petra had been healing without him. That is how long he had been learning to become someone different than who he was. He was not the same person who had walked out of court 10 years ago. Prison had changed him. The letter from Rebecca had changed him. The photograph of Petra had changed him. The knowledge that every single day for 10 years, Petra was somewhere in the world living without fear, that had changed him the most. He did not go directly to the sanctuary. He went to a small apartment first. He got a job at a warehouse. He kept his head down. He tried to be invisible because he knew that his name was still connected to the worst thing he had ever done. He knew that if people saw his face, they would remember the video. They would remember the cropping. They would remember the mud. He knew that he would spend the rest of his life being the man who tortured a horse that the entire internet had come to love. But after 3 weeks of waiting, of being alone in an apartment, of thinking about the photograph every single day, he decided he had to go. He had to see. He had to know if his transformation meant anything. He had to understand if Petra was really okay. He did not call ahead. He just showed up at the sanctuary gate on a Saturday morning in early March. Exactly 10 years and 1 week after the morning he had tried to drag a boat through mud and water. His hands were shaking as he walked to the office. Rebecca Chun was not there, but a younger woman named Sarah was working at the front desk. Sarah looked up and asked if she could help him. Merrick tried to speak, but the words would not come. "I'm looking for information about a horse named Petra," he said finally. Sarah's face changed. Everyone at the sanctuary knew Petra's story. Everyone in the world knew Petra's story. But Sarah did not recognize Merrick. How could she? His face had aged 10 years. His hair was completely white. His body was thinner from prison and from the weight of regret. "Petra is one of our most famous residents," Sarah said. "She is in the back pasture. We have a strict policy about visitors. But if you want to see her, you can walk out there. She loves meeting people. That is one of the most amazing things about her. After everything she went through, she trusts." Merrick walked toward the back pasture. His heart was beating so hard that he thought it might break. He did not know what he would feel when he saw her. He did not know if the emotion would destroy him. When he saw Petra, he had to sit down in the dirt. She was more beautiful than the photograph had shown. She was standing in good grass. She was fat and healthy. She was standing next to another horse that he did not recognize. Her coat was shiny. Her eyes were bright. She looked at him from across the pasture, and something in her face said that she knew him, that she remembered him, but not as the man with the crop. She just looked at him like she was looking at another creature in her world, with no particular emotion, with no anger, with simple, perfect indifference. "You know her?" a voice asked. Merrick looked up. Standing there was a young woman. She was probably 26 or 27 years old. She had kind eyes and strong hands. She was wearing a sanctuary volunteer shirt. This was David. Merrick could not speak. "I am David," the girl said. "I volunteer here. I have worked with Petra every day for the past 10 years. She's the reason I am alive. Literally, I was suicidal when I came to this place. Petra saved me." Merrick still could not speak. "Are you okay?" David asked. She sat down next to him in the dirt. This was the kind of thing that David did now. She sat with people when they were breaking. She understood breaking because Petra had taught her how to heal from it. "I need to tell you something," Merrick said. "I need to tell you who I am." And he told her. He told her everything. He told her about the boat and the mud and the rope and the crop. He told her about prison. He told her about the letter. He told her about the photograph. He told her about 10 years of understanding what he had done. He told her about becoming someone different. David did not move while he talked. She just sat there in the dirt next to the man who had tortured the horse that had saved her life. When he finished, David was quiet for a very long time. If Petra had not been tortured, David said finally, she would not have been at the sanctuary. If she had not been at the sanctuary, I would be dead right now. I tried to kill myself 3 times before I came here. The last time almost worked. But I came to the sanctuary because the court sent me here. And Petra saved me. She looked at Merrick with eyes that were not angry. "I should hate you," David said. "But I cannot hate you. Because if I hate you, then I have to hate the thing that gave me my life. And I love my life now. So what do I do with that?" Merrick started crying. Not silent tears. Real, body-shaking crying. "You do what Petra did," David said. "You forgive. Not because the person deserves it, but because you deserve to be free from the hate." She stood up and offered him her hand. He took it. She pulled him up. They walked toward Petra together. The horse watched them come. When they got close, David held out her hand. Petra stepped forward and let David touch her neck, right where the rope scars still showed. Then Petra turned and looked at Merrick. For a moment, Merrick thought the horse would move away. He thought Petra would show him that even animals have limits to forgiveness. But Petra stepped forward and allowed him to touch her neck as well. Allowed him to feel the scars that he had made. Allowed him to understand, in that moment, that she was not forgiving him because he deserved it. She was forgiving him because she had decided to stop carrying the weight of what he had done to her. Rebecca Chun found them like that 3 hours later. A man and a girl and a horse, standing together in the sunshine. She understood immediately what had happened. She understood because she had been waiting for this moment for 10 years. "Welcome home," Rebecca said to Merrick. Not because he was welcome to stay, but because he was finally home in the knowledge of what he had done and what could come next. Merrick never asked for forgiveness. He never asked if he could come back to the sanctuary. He simply went back to his apartment and his warehouse job. But he volunteered his free time at animal protection organizations. He gave talks about animal cruelty. He used his story, the worst part of his story, to teach other people why animals could not be treated as property. He became the walking advertisement for what happens when cruelty is exposed and a person chooses to change. 10 years later, Thomas Merrick died in his apartment from a sudden heart attack. He was 57 years old. When they found his body, they found a shrine of sorts. Photographs of Petra, letters from David, documentation of every animal welfare law that his testimony had helped strengthen. A life spent trying to make sure that what happened to Petra would not happen to another creature. The sanctuary held a small memorial for him. Rebecca spoke. David spoke. And they stood with Petra in the field where Merrick had sat in the dirt and understood his own transformation. Petra was old by then. She was 28 years old. She was a senior horse. But she was still standing, still breathing, still showing the world that survival was possible. When Rebecca scattered Merrick's ashes in the field where Petra grazed, nobody said anything. They all understood that some stories do not have endings. They have transformations. They have moments where broken things choose to heal each other. They have choices that ripple forward into eternity. Petra lived for 3 more years. She was the most visited horse at the sanctuary. Thousands of people came to see her. Thousands of people touched her scars and understood something about their own healing. Thousands of people learned that the most powerful thing in the world was not strength. It was the choice to trust again. It was the choice to forgive. It was the choice to keep living even when the world had given every reason to die. When Petra finally passed away at 31 years old, she was surrounded by David, Rebecca, and a community of people who had been changed by her story. She had given everything a horse could give. She had shown that power was not about force. Power was about choosing gentleness. Power was about opening your heart to another broken creature and saying, "We will both keep living. We will both keep healing, and we will do it together." The video that started everything still exists on the internet. More than 50 million people have watched it. But it is not the abuse that people remember anymore. It is not the cruelty. They remember what came after. They remember that a teenage girl had the courage to film it. They remember that an investigator had the vision to help. They remember that a horse had the strength to trust again. They remember that a man in prison had the wisdom to transform himself. They remember that a broken teenager learned to love again. They remember that the most powerful horse on earth was not powerful because of her muscles. She was powerful because she chose. And choices, as Petra would teach everyone who touched her story, changed the world. The end. Epilogue. 50 years after Petra's death, statues of her likeness were erected in 3 cities dedicated to animal welfare. Her story was made into a documentary that won international awards. Her name became synonymous with the possibility of redemption and healing. Children learned about her in schools. Animal protection laws were named after her. Universities studied her case as evidence that transformation is possible, that forgiveness is real, and that one horse's choice to trust again could teach the entire world how to live differently. But the most important legacy was not the statutes or the laws or the documentaries. The most important legacy was the thousands of people who walked through sanctuaries and shelter, touched the scars of broken animals, and understood that they were also capable of healing. The most important legacy was the broken people who saw Petra's story and decided that if a horse could forgive, then maybe they could too. Petra was a horse. She was not supposed to change the world, but she did, because she made a choice. And one choice, made by one creature, can transform everything.